What we do see is we've done our own studies and we're about to do a published study. And what we see is that people with ADHD and ADHD alone do not overrepresent on the are more likely to be on benefits. But ADHD plus additional things, we do.
Official statistics show more than 100,000 people with ADHD are being paid disability benefits without any requirements to look for work. That's an increase of 40% since Labour came to power. The government has approved an average of 40 personal independent payments, known as PIP, every day over the past 2 years, where ADHD is cited as the main condition. Of all those claiming PIP for ADHD, about 4 in 10 are receiving the top rate of daily living and mobility allowances, worth up to £194 a week. Henry Shelford is CEO of ADHD UK, joins us now. Henry, morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
It's a great pleasure. Do these numbers surprise you at all?
They don't, in terms of that we're finally getting counted. So finally, people with ADHD are getting an assessment, but it's still often with huge weights, and we're being counted. And so when you start getting counted, the numbers start getting up. It's not to do with the ADHD, it's to do with the measurement.
Do you believe that many people with ADHD, the condition is so serious that it makes it impossible for them to work?
I mean, I have ADHD right now. I'm up early, working, doing this. And,
yeah, exactly. Of those claiming PIP for ADHD, about 4 in 10 are receiving the top rate of daily living and mobility allowance. So I guess the question is, are you surprised that the ADHD is such a limiting condition that it stops people working?
So when we've done our own studies of this, so we see people with ADHD absolutely thriving, like doing incredibly well, being at the top of what they're doing. We see people really struggling. One of the big issues is the healthcare gap and not being able to get your ADHD addressed, not being able to get an assessment, not being able to get the medication support. If you move, let's say you want to get a job elsewhere, you move, your medication stops and you go to the back of the queue having to wait. So if I got a lovely job with the BBC, moved to Manchester, the wait would be on average 37 years before I could receive the medication that makes such a life-changing difference for me. What we do see is we've done our own studies and we're about to do a published study, and what we see is that people with ADHD and ADHD alone do not overrepresent on the are more likely to be on benefits. But ADHD plus additional things, we do. And so...
But at the minute, the government's approved an average of 40 PIP payments every day over the past 2 years, where ADHD is cited as the main condition. That's a lot of people getting PIP for ADHD, and that's increasing.
And that part of that tells you, so look, ADHD is tough, right? You can only get a diagnosis of ADHD if it's having a debilitating impact on your life. And we know how tough it is most harshly through statistics on suicide. So we know that 1 in 10 men or boys with ADHD will at some point try and take their own life. And it's 1 in 4 women or girls with ADHD, 1 in 4 will at some point try and take their own life. And actually for the first 2 years of the charity, we were almost exclusively funded by parents whose children had taken their own life. So ADHD is tough. But what we... I've lost this.
No. I think that's a very
Can I jump in, Henry? Because one of the questions that our listeners have been asking this morning is around what is it about ADHD that makes it so difficult to work? And obviously it's a spectrum and not everybody has all of the same traits, but could you explain to our listeners what might make it so hard for somebody to be able to participate in work that they could be counted out completely?
Well, PIP is... also an in-work benefit, so it's support.
That's true, but this story is also about those who have no obligation to seek work. So I suppose what we're trying to get at is what about the condition might make it so difficult that you would not need to seek work?
I see very few situations where ADHD on its own would put you in that place. But what I do see is people waiting years, decades for treatment. And in one part of the country, the wait currently is over 300 years. And in that time, huge damage being wrought. And that can be in depression, anxiety, but it's also, we see links with physical conditions, increases in respiratory conditions, in cardiac issues, which we don't fully know the links why, but we know that that's happening. So, but So it is ADHD plus other things is the things that we see.
I understand that point.
Limit people in a job.
Henry, can I ask a difficult question? Because what you're talking about, there's clearly examples you've seen, people with a very serious condition that has led to all sorts of awful impacts on them and their families. Are you at all worried that ADHD at the lower end is being claimed by people, self-diagnosed by people, and it's becoming something that's very different from the serious conditions that you're talking about? It's becoming a catch-all term used by some people simply because it's a way of explaining their lives that suits them and suits the work they do or don't want to do. Does that concern you at all?
Yes. So ADHD is a very serious condition, and it's been created with the healthcare gap, a issue of self-diagnosis, and a group of people who, if you say, for example, I think I've got ADHD, but I don't need an assessment, I don't need support. Well, you probably don't have ADHD. ADHD is only diagnosed as having a debilitating impact on your life, and actually it undermines the people with ADHD by saying, "Oh yeah, I'm all right with it."
Yeah.
The line is debilitation, and it's so tough, and so yes, the sort of that lack of clarity, the lack of formal diagnosis, and self-diagnosis undermining it is where it's incorrect is a problem.
Because I was just googling it. If you put ADHD into a search engine, there's just any number of what looks like monetized 3-minute self-diagnosis things, which I'm sure are being used not with people with debilitating conditions that require long-term support, because it just seems like an easy thing to catch themselves to justify parts of their life.
Yeah, and on social media, in every single topic and realm, you have brilliant people and brilliant conversations, and you have awful ones that are negative and wrong, and that's across the board. But the issue, you see often around mental health conditions and issues and disorders, the general public confuse their own issues. So we have issues of focus, and that leads to procrastination. Well, look what. People confuse their own issues with procrastination, with focus, with arts, and they're not the same. In the same way, depression, sort of 20 years ago, people would say, have you tried turning that frown upside down?
Yeah.
If you smile at the world, it'll smile back at you. That was genuine advice, people with depression. And 20 years ago, obviously it's laughable now, we've changed. But for ADHD, we've still got that issue. People are confusing their own issues with focus, with ours. And obviously it's very, very different. And that line is most blurred on social media in some areas.
I think that's such an important point for people to have in their minds. Very fair-minded of you, Henry. Good to speak to you.
Thank you.
That's Henry Shelford, the CEO of ADHD UK, making the point that the true diagnosis of ADHD is the debilitating effect.